So hello everybody, welcome to day 2 of Through the Fire, integrating the gifts of anxiety. So we were chatting a little bit about any questions. Nobody really had any questions, but Ronnie has already implemented some things yesterday and had some results. So if you haven't watched the first day, go back and watch that. And today we're going to talk about predominantly Chinese medicine. We're going to try and, it's a topic. I went to school for 4 years for Chinese medicine. So obviously we can't take 4 years to, 45-minute conversation, but we're going to go through the main points. And then I also want to go over kind of like an extension of what we did the first day. So we're going to talk a little bit more about identifying our feelings and how to kind of like build a library and that kind of stuff. So Danica, did you have any questions from the first day?
No, I don't. It was awesome. It helped me a lot, actually.
Oh, good. I'm glad. We kind of were all over the place, but it was a really good talk. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start. So just really briefly, in Chinese medicine, for everyone like super brand new to it, it's the premise, the way that they sort of explain things, like all ancients, they looked at the environment around them, and they looked at the environment around them to sort of figure out what was for observation purposes to see, and they started to realize that what was going outside was going on inside, so above, so below, so within, so without kind of thing. And all honestly, like most ancient cultures did have this observation. Part of the reason I think that they were able to have that observation is because there is a certain amount of stillness that does not exist right now. And that's part of why, learning about ancient medicine and ancient wisdom is important, but also looking at it with our modern lens is incredibly important, and not following everything like to the T, because we do live a different life than they did. So yin yang theory, a lot of people say yin yang, but it's yin yang, which is the Taiji, which is that symbol, right? The yin yang that we see, which if you notice it's yin within yang, yang within yin, right? So it's the idea that you have duality, but within the duality, there's always aspects of the other, if that makes sense. And so one of the main things that we need to remember is, like, within human experiences, we experience duality on purpose. And part of that is so that we can because we're having a differentiated experience, we're having an experience that is separate from the whole, because that's where you can have evolution. And through choice, you can have change and growth and all this stuff. So that's part of, in my opinion, what I've learned is that's why, we have this differentiated experience. But we all think about, even without getting too far into gender and sexuality, like femininity is just not femininity. Masculinity is not just masculinity, right? Like every person has all of these aspects within them. Every action has that within it. So, sometimes we like to break things down into one or the other, but there's always that nuance, which Chinese medicine talks about, that integration and like that flow, right? Like sometimes there's more of one and then there's more of the other, but there's always, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, there's always both. It's just at what percentage or whatever. And that's part of like the cycles of the seasons, which we'll talk about just a little bit, because every season pertains to a Chinese medicine element as well. And when you look at things like the I Ching, for anybody not really familiar but is interested, likes numbers and likes sort of not numerology, but sort of like the programming. If you have a programming type mind, and you see things in that number, the I Ching explains it that way. It's sort of like my brain's not telling me the word, but yeah, it's like that code sort of thing, and it breaks it down in that way. And within that, it'll show you yin within yang, yang within yin, like all of these pieces, and you can see the evolution of it through a whole year cycle. So within Chinese medicine, there's 5 elements. There's fire, earth, metal, water, and wood. So the way that we look, did I say all of them?
No, you did. I just said I didn't know about metal.
Yes. So metal is different. Like Chinese medicine has metal. In astrology and some of the other like more Western type philosophies and thoughts about elements, usually there's air, right?
Mm-hmm.
Within I'm not very well versed in Indian medicine, so Ayurveda and all that. It's really beautiful, but it's not my area of expertise. But I know that they are looking more at, like, they have that air quality as well.
Yes.
So metal is going to have a little bit about that, but the Chinese were very much like what is on earth, about the human experience, like what is in the environment, and metals in the environment, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah.
So that's why. So the way that it works, it is a little bit like like a little house is the way I look at it. So you have fire up here. I wish I had a thing. I have so many books and I don't have an example. But anyway, you have fire. And so it's in a cycle. It's in a circle because one begets the other. So fire generates earth. And if you think about like a prescribed burn, a prescribed fire.
You get the ash and got it. Yep.
It's done purposefully and controlled. And even before, like, that is something that occurred naturally. Like the lightning would come and go to an area. And, obviously we're talking about situations that are balanced, not places that are so dry that the fire is like, we're not talking about that, of course, but in sort of that's why I like talking about the prescribed burn, because it makes the most sense. This is something that is done on purpose when the conditions are right, for the purposes of allowing the old growth to fall away and the earth to become fresh and renewed. So the fire generates the earth, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And earth generates metal. Why? Because within the earth, there is metal. Like when you go searching, what do you find?
You find the metals.
All the ores come from inside the earth, right? So then metal generates water. Think about metal and condensation on metal creates what? Creates water,
got it.
right? It also can contain water, which water is a really beautiful element. Honestly, we could do a whole class on water, but because of the nature of water, like can't really be contained, but it can, So that's one of the interesting things about it. So metal generates water, and then water generates wood. That one's kind of obvious because water obviously.
And then wood feeds fire.
Exactly. And then wood feeds fire. It generates fire. It creates fire. So when we're talking about, so that cycle helps us understand within our body the balance, right? When each one is balanced, each function occurs in a way that supports our body, mind, and spirit. So there's organ systems that belong to each one. And so that's where like they look like outside when everything is in balance, right? When you have that fire, sometimes when everything is just working together in this synergy in the external environment, everything is well and everyone's happy and fed and like all of these things, right? And the same is true within our physical bodies. And so when we're talking about sort of like pathology, which is a little bit what we're talking about today, because we're talking about anxiety and how anxiety fits in, like how does Chinese medicine view anxiety? And it depends who you ask, because some old school will say, no, anxiety, that's a modern thing. And it's not really. I think the way in which we just have a lot more input now. So because we have more input, people that are more sensitive in a way like stick out more, and it's more of a pathology now than it used to be because of the excess input, if that makes sense.
I also think that part of our culture we've lost that tried training for empathics. When you were sensitive, you were brought to somebody who was wise and they helped you formulate, so you didn't have the unknown. I mean, my anxiety is because of that. Where's the hell is this coming from?
Yeah.
So
yeah, not being trained. And I think that's that's really important to understand, because oftentimes within cultures, they knew when the child was born.
Mm-hmm.
They were aware. And so there's that. And then there's also like within families, certain gifts and abilities like pass on through families, period. And where we're at right now in our culture is that the last 2 or 3 generations, it is not that the abilities skipped. That is not the case. What it is that there was a rejection of it. So there's a wounding and a trauma there, period. But there's also what happened is that there's a devoid of culture and a devoid of connection. We no longer have the grandma that can tell us,
Yes.
you know, there's not those stories anymore. There's not like that passing on. There's not that oral lineage. There's not that tradition lineage. And I think especially in the United States, this has happened. I have my conspiracy theory ideas about why that's happened here. But when you really look at it, we're a melting pot, period, in the US. And I think we have people who are doing the replay who are from all over. And, you know, if you're from somewhere else, you can speak a little bit better, because when you live in a place, you're more aware and familiar with what's going on. But I know in the US, what I've sort of observed is you have all of this melting pot, all of these people coming in, especially the people who came like in the beginning, right? When we first were settling the country and all of that. And there's so much that happened. I mean, again, that's a whole live stream on its own. It's a whole class on its own. But what's happened is these people come in, right? You come from England, you come from Germany, you come from Poland, you come from Italy, you come from all the places, and you come here, and then all of a sudden, very almost insidiously, the in order to fit in order to assimilate, like that's what's interesting about the melting pot. We say the melting pot, but what does that really mean? We all sort of assimilated into this new culture that's sort of devoid of this connection. And so we lost a lot of what is taught, especially when you're talking about what I would call a generational American. Generational Americans to me is anybody who's been here longer than 3 generations. When you don't really know when your people came here, that's a generational American. When you're like, I don't really know. So there's like, yeah, you know, my great grandma was German, but there's no like, certainly not the language, certainly not the cultures. And when you're talking about people who are more sensitive and have abilities and have this and have that and the other, it's even more insidious, because at this point, because of what's happening on earth and because of what's happening within our cultures, that everything's rapidly, you know, people refer to ascension times or whatever, like, but there's all of this rapidly happening things, and we don't have this anchor to anybody, to anyone from our family. And so we're all like clamoring about, and, you know, to people looking in, it's like, well, this is new. No, it's not new. It's just that we're disconnected from that. And I know this is not about anxiety, but it's important, I think, part to put, because I think that's part of our issue, is that, like you addressed, Ronnie, is that we don't have that person to go to. You know, we're not brought in.
Yep.
And that, I think that's true for people who are sensitive or not sensitive, people who just have anxiety. This is something that the community would care for each other.
Yes.
So both pieces, right? So when
Yep.
there's overwhelm, like, it was rare, but like, let's say, you know, the warrior died and left his family. That family was taken care of. That woman didn't have to, she wasn't on her own. She had this whole village behind her, right?
Yep.
So there's a lot of situations where like are devoid of connection. Anyway, again, that could go. But a lot of our anxiety issues is that overwhelm of stimuli, but then at the same time, it's a devoid of connection, right? It's all of these things at the same time, and neither, like, it's anyway. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say about that. Again, that's a topic that we need to talk more about, because it's such a good one in terms of sort of losing our roots, you know?
Yeah.
And having them but not really being connected to them. And I think it's also part of why, like, especially when people start to wake up, so to speak, and being aware that there's more to things and really starting to understand ourselves, especially Americans, but I would say in the world as a whole, there's a lot of looking at indigenous cultures, right? Because there's more retention of that than ancestral roots, for example, in Ireland or England or like whatever, like it's very, very rare in those Western countries to have like those old witchy ways or those old like healer ways or the old seer ways like that, you know. So anyway, I'm total tangent. We're gonna come back. But I think that that's important. But so where, as we come back, where do we want to talk about now? Yes, so understanding the 5 elements and understanding the pathological parts. So when our elements are all in balance, again, which is very rare, especially now, everything is happy and everything is flowing. And so what starts to happen is that one thing will start to go haywire. So a common thing that happens is something called liver qi stagnation. So the liver is related to wood, and the liver is the general. And the general likes to tell everybody what to do. The liver tells everybody what to do, and da, 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 and, you know, orderly, and like, here are the, and what happens is this wood element is also in charge of like decision making and all this stuff. But when we have all this input, right, and we have all this stuff, and it's just so much, what the liver's very prone, really, in a way, to get constipated, to get all like tight, to all get all like stagnated. So liver chi energy, liver chi stagnation, like all this stuckness, right? So the energy is just stuck. So it's not that we don't have enough. It's just that it's all stuck within us, right? And so something like that, when there's not flow, of course, would make somebody really nervous. Their system would be really nervous because they have to, all this energy has to pass through, and there's all these blocks and like, you know, tightness and all of this stuff, right? And when I say blocks, I don't mean anything specific. I don't mean like particular belief system. I'm talking about really straight up, simple, just energy stuck, period, right? Like before we even get nuanced with the details, it's just stuck. And so that's one of the common, I would say probably the most common ways that anxiety is going to show up Chinese medicine wise when you're looking at the diagnostic part of it. Some symptoms with that are going to be like that frustration, that agitation, that irritation sort of thing, right? Maybe popping up with anger sometimes, that feeling of constriction. And anxiety with liver qi stagnation, there's this like nervous kind of, there's like this, like it's all bottled up and you just want to move, you know, and you just can't move, and you like, so that like with a wiggling in the chair kind of thing, they're being restricted, right? And then something else that's common, oh, actually, I'm going to teach this way. So what happens with qi stagnation is not always, but sometimes when things are all stuck, there's not enough free flow of qi, right? There's not enough energy moving. So then you end up with symptoms of not enough energy. So qi deficiency, not because you don't actually have it like in ancient times because they didn't have food. Our problem isn't that we didn't have that, right? It's that it's stuck, but it's showing up as deficiency. Does that make sense? Because these are, so something like that, lethargy, being really tired, spleen qi deficiency especially. So the spleen and the stomach are related to earth, to the earth element. So that is going to show up as like that being pulled down to the ground. Sometimes that also shows up as dampness. So dampness is like clouds in the sky, but in our body. And it's that like pulled down to the ground.
Heavy. I call it my heaviness. It's like, it just feels heavy.
Yeah. And so somebody who is going to, you know, is more prone to dampness, things that are common are like upset stomachs related with the anxiety, right? You're going to have a puffy tongue a lot of times, or teeth marks, or a thick white coat. And just for anybody watching who's curious, that sometimes means, oh, brain, please tell me the word. Oh, goodness, that's fun. Okay, that's all right. The stomach thing, what? Sometimes I think I don't even speak human. Anyway, so we're going to keep going. What is it called?
What, the acid
Candida.
reflux?
Candida. So sometimes candida, people see that thick coating and they say
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes with a person who's dampy, they do have candida overgrowth and sometimes they don't. So it's not always. You want to look at everything and all that. But when there's dampness, there's that anxiety, but there's also going to be like that foggy headedness often, right? That difficulty like tuning in, that difficulty like connecting through and seeing through the fog, if that makes sense. Another thing that shows up is blood deficiency. So we're talking about the energetic portions of blood. Some people who are blood deficient are anemic as well, and sometimes they're not. It really varies. Women are a lot more predisposed to being blood deficient than men because obviously women, you know, who have not gone through menopause yet are cycling, and so that there's that aspect to it. And then childbirth and all those sorts of things use up qi and blood. And as a side note, especially for anybody watching this that has experienced symptoms of postpartum depression and anxiety, particularly after giving birth, there's a lot going on there. We do not support women who are pregnant or postpartum nearly 1/10 as well as we should. The pregnancy and postpartum period is an incredibly beautiful time to be able to heal and become well. It really is, and it's something that is not viewed in our culture at all. But in Chinese medicine, there's this open vessel, and you're so full of energy, and you're so full of everything that you need. All the resources are there. Like everything's being funneled for this new life, and the vessel has the vessel meaning the mother, right? The gestating mother. And this would be true like of a surrogate too. So it's not just whether or not the child is biologically yet. Anyway, the reason I say that is the process of pregnancy is what does this, is that vessel kind of thing. And instead of really taking care of a mother or taking care of ourselves or whatever, what ends up happening is we have to do all the things still. You have to push, go, go, go. There's like this competition of how quickly after you have a baby, you bounce back, right?
Oh, hell yeah.
And not just the physical, like being trim and fit, but like all of it, like, you know, 3 days after doing laundry, thinking that that's the way it was at the ancients. Nope. At a certain point, sure. I think industrialization is when we started losing that connection to having to take care of each other and our bodies. But anyway, the reason I say that is because this is a recording and people may, you know, that's an important thing to understand, that there's a unique thing that's happening if these symptoms happened or began. If you never had these symptoms of anxiety and even depression in a way, which we're not really talking about too much right now, but specifically after pregnancy, a lot of times that's going to be blood deficiency. Okay, a lot of times it's going to be qi deficiency. A lot of times what you need is lots of rest, lots of good food, and being taken care of. And herbs are fantastic, amazing at helping with supporting postpartum and that sort of thing. I mean, I would say herbs in general are fantastic for anxiety in general, but okay, so there's that part. What else? So the blood deficiency, the way part of some of the other symptoms that are going to show up with that, it's going to be dryness oftentimes. So dry skin, dry hair. There's like a fatigue, like a lethargy, rather than being pulled down like with that dampness. There's no get up and go, if that makes sense. So you're not quite pulled down to the ground, but there's not enough.
You can't seem to get the motivation going.
Yeah,
The motivation. Yeah. You're plugging into things that have already figured out, but you're now giving them words and spaces that actually make connection sense. I have RA.
Okay.
I was diagnosed in 2000. I actually went to a full-blown flare-up in 2005. Took them half a year to figure out what was going on. And then they had to work through, I had a blood deficiency. I was seriously anemic. I was seriously vitamin D deficiency. My vitamin C, I was taking a mass amount of vitamin C, but I wasn't processing it. And I had what they call the reptile skin, My skin was dry, but it was lizardy. So you didn't really get, so it took them a hell of a lot of time to get the RA figured out. Even though I popped 3 times on the test, they still were like going, oh, no, it's a false positive. It's false positive. Like, do whatever.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm trying to figure out is where is this RA blockage? Because I seriously believe it was triggered. I seriously believe it's an energy block because I feel it when I actually get into the space. When it flares up, I can start feeling this push. The body has a problem, but I want to see how to work the problem, how to lessen the problem, because it's affecting my walking. That's the real problem. It's really affecting the ability to walk. So, and I got the earth, I got the wood, the earth makes sense. I don't know where this type of, what I call, it's constricting. It's the type of energy is constricting. It's closing in on me.
It's damp.
It's damp.
Yeah. Likely you've had phlegm misting the mind from when you were a child. It's part of why, like, some of the symptoms of being on the spectrum. Part of that is the phlegm misting the mind. So what that means, phlegm is whenever it's above the lungs. So
Yep.
up, and then below we refer to it as dampness. It's just how Chinese medicine differentiates.
Okay.
It's still a process, if that makes sense.
It makes sense because I feel always congested from here up.
Yeah, yeah. And so
Even my voice sounds it.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things with that. That can sometimes show up depression as well, because it's misting the mind, confusion, lots of different things. Again, so in Chinese medicine, you can have 5 people with the same symptoms, and it's 5 different Chinese medicine diagnoses.
Oh.
And then you can also have 5 people with the same Chinese medicine diagnosis that have different symptoms, different sets of symptoms. Okay.
All right. Makes sense.
And that's part of why, like, for me, what I'm really good at, and Chinese medicine is really good at as a whole, I would say, is when things don't make sense in Western medicine, we got it. Because Chinese medicine is looking at things in this synergistic way that it makes sense. I think, remember, that was one of the most exciting things when I was in school, like noticing these patterns as you're studying them. You have to learn things a certain way. So we learn it like the book, like really simple kind of, qi stagnation, these symptoms, these symptoms, right? But you see this stuff that some of them are precisely some of these unusual Western medicine diagnoses that they don't know why it's all these different physical systems. So they don't know why such and such illness has neurological and gastrointestinal and like respiratory. That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, hi, it does. So yeah, anyway, so Chinese medicine is very good at that. Part of it, like, you can hear how some of the symptoms we talked about, they're symptoms from all different parts of the body. It isn't just one thing. So that's where we've right now identified how the anxiety is rooted with the stomach issue somebody has, which is rooted with the skin issue. It's all related. It all has the same root. But instead, people are on 5 different medications and go to 10 different doctors, which is fine. And I'm not poo-pooing that at all.
No, I've actually got to the point I can't deal with it anymore with them. They conflict. They constantly argue with each other.
But it's simply because of the way that Western medicine is made up. That's it. It's just how they view the body. It's not a big deal. It's not their fault. It's just based on the system. It's the way it's made up. I mean, you're talking about allopathic medicine being about 200 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, just right there, I think it's pretty, that tells you everything.
Yep.
You have other medicine, or thousands had the same thought patterns for over 2,000 and 3,000 years old, and in some cases 5,000, right, depending on which you're talking about. So what I encourage everybody to do with their anxiety and with their body as a whole is like really look holistically, look at, you know, people that can help serve them and figure out what in the world's going on with them in particular. So Danica, I know you're listening too, and you're probably with your kids. Do you have any questions about the stuff that we've covered so far?
No, I don't have any questions. You actually answered so much because I had never dealt with anxiety until I became a mom. It was actually postpartum with my second pregnancy, and then I had it second, third, and then I didn't have it with my fourth, but I had a lot of support, and then with my fifth, I had it again.
Wow,
So
you've got
very
5
interesting.
kids. Wow.
Yeah.
And so that's
I stopped at 3. I was like, no, more. For me, 3 was just absolutely.
Three's the hardest for sure. I feel like after that, you're just busy, so it really isn't a big deal.
Oh.
Three was for sure my hardest adjustment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Three was.
Go ahead. I think just identifying that support, like that's the most important part, is noticing, like having that support. And it also was like a new experience given everything else in your life, and like just
right.
It allowed for there to be like, oh, I'm okay. So I think that that's no matter if it's about postpartum and having babies, or getting a new job, or moving across the country, or whatever it is that everyone's going through, having support is the biggest thing. And like us giving ourselves permission to have assistance, have help, and that there's nothing wrong with having help, whatever that means. Ask for the things that we need, I think can make such a huge difference, especially when it comes to anxiety. It's like really identifying, like, I can do this and I cannot do that, and I need assistance with this. This helps take the load off of me. And when we start to do that and assume that we will be as supported, because I think that a lot of times, especially women, we have this idea that we aren't going to be, our needs won't be met. So we don't even ask, because we have the preconceived idea that we won't be well supported, because historically we haven't. But once we start, this is where that mind and creating our experience and all that kind of stuff, it's that if we start to expect something different, we allow the space for there to be something different.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say about that in terms of support and all of that. And it's just so important. And even like with seeking, medical care, like how are you well supported? Are you being heard? Like, even within the Western medical community, all doctors are not made the same. That all of them have the same passion and drive, and because you have the basic understanding of Western medicine, but then you have the physician who's trying new things and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah. So I think that does it for today. I feel like talking about anything else would kind of be off topic, and this is a lot to absorb, because I know a lot of these concepts are like sort of new concepts. So I think that our third workshop is going to be on Tuesday, I believe, in the morning. The email should have mentioned. If not, there's going to be another one going out with this recording, and then the link for the next one. I think it's Tuesday at 10, I want to say.
I think it was 9.
9? Okay.
Yeah, because I think it was going to be a problem for me.
Okay. I'll check, because I think I have an appointment at 9, so it should say 10.
Okay.
So I'll make sure. So
10 will be fine. 10 will actually work. 9 o'clock is reserved for me and the Fox, and I am not breaking this agreement. This is something.
There you go.
This has been one of those life changers that when we moved, we said we're doing.
I love that. That's so important. Those things really change relationships.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Yeah, good for you. So I'm pretty sure it's 10, because I remember on my schedule that it's 9 o'clock. So I'll make sure, and you all will get that. And then on the third one, where we're going to talk really more deeply, we will do a healing together for it. And then we are going to talk a lot more about like how to integrate, a lot more about how, and we talked a little bit about that yesterday. But tomorrow we'll talk more about like creating a library, and the energetics, and even the Chinese medicine stuff. Like, how do you support? We might talk a little, I don't know if we're going to go into food too much or anything like that, but I can point you the direction of additional resources if anybody wants to have more assistance with the Chinese medicine portion. And I'm of course available for that too. We can do consultations, and there's all kinds of stuff that I do with that as well. And I think that's it.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So how does the chakras and the Chinese medicine work together?
I believe that different groups of people were bestowed different understandings based on a lot of the why is multi-pronged, right? Like why weren't just one group of people given all of the things? I think there's reasons behind that. But I do think that they're all related to each other. And I do think that we were bestowed different knowledge. And it's kind of like saying, how does the nervous system relate to the circulatory system? So they just both exist, right? And of course we can get really deep and nuanced and see like how good blood flow does support good neurological connections, and all of that is really important. And if you have a lack of supply of blood flow, you're going to have a lack of nerves firing and that sort of thing, right? And I think in a way the same is true with the meridian system and the chakra system. They're both important and functioning. You know, if you have a deficiency in one area, like in Chinese medicine, in the meridian systems, likely there's going to be a related chakra issue in that area. Does that make sense?
Sort of. My thought is, this is where I've mutated it, the chakras. During my work with chakras, I actually envision the different things that are in the area, whether it's muscle, organs. So I've kind of felt like the chakras were too linear and they weren't thinking of the whole space. And what you were talking about just now, specifically what resonated with me was the liver. I had my not my appendix, but my gallbladder taken out a couple years ago, and that really started me thinking about my liver and its functionality in my space. And of course, it starts acting up. Of course, it says, "Hi, I'm doing stuff for you," but. So I was thinking about that because that's one of the things I'm working on with the chakras as I do my meditation and work with the flow, is thinking about the organs that are in that space and flowing them more energy. And like I said, the liver, the general, the agitation, like, yeah, totally get that. So
I'm glad that made sense for you. I think in terms of like focusing on an area, the thing about the Chinese medicine is that, yes, there's such this holographic and holistic way with Chinese medicine. So I have my stomach and spleen technically in the third chakra, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I also have a meridian system that is related to the stomach and the spleen that passes through up and down through my body. That
I don't stop.
Right. And that's the part that's really interesting. It's like, but that's where a lot of people don't understand, like the nadis within the chakra system. It's very similar to Chinese medicine. So we have these systems rather, right? Mm-hmm. So you have, here's the root, and even like your earth star. And even when you know all those, which are incredibly important, understanding those other ones, right? That 11 rather than the 7 chakra system. So that's where it gets nuanced. It's like the nadis and all of those, the sub chakra system. That's where you're getting a really functional. That's when it starts to really make sense. So everybody's at a different space. So I would say the general public, when you're first starting to have an understanding a really linear Western mind is going to have trouble but can understand a 7 chakra system, da 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 da, very linear. Here it is. This one starts, this one ends, and it isn't quite like that, right? And when our understandings start to grow, such as with you, like, and especially if we can feel these things in our body or see them or feel them in other people, we can actually see what they're really like, and then it doesn't match what the book says.
No, it doesn't.
Because a lot of, I would say, a lot of books are really a beginner level kind of situations, very like beginning knowledge, and which is great and important. Like, we can't go to college before we've gone to kindergarten. Like, we have to learn our colors before we learn astrophysics. So, and not everyone can learn astrophysics, and there's nothing wrong with the fact, and that's the part, like, human beings, we want so much, well, I know the most because I'm special. It's like, no, we don't know. I always use the example of singing. I love singing. I'm not Beyonce. Never gonna be Beyonce. Me too, right? And so that's the thing that's really important to understand, that our worth is not dependent on these things. However, we all have our path and our gifts and abilities for a reason. So I feel like that was kind of tangent. What was I trying to say with the understandings? Okay, so with our understandings of the systems, when we're going beyond that beginner kind of knowledge, that's especially if we're experiencing or seeing. So a lot of people who can actually see, or even with claircognizance and clairsentience, the colors of the chakra system are not the stereotypical colors that are usually touted. People who can see them often see them differently.
Yeah, I
And
do.
there's nothing wrong with that. And it's important to know, again, wherever we are is where we are. And the concept, when we're first learning something, we have to learn the basics, and then that knowledge evolves and grows and expands. And then what's really, really cool and weird and interesting about this evolution of knowledge, that things can get really, really, really complex, and then it gets real simple again. Which is really like a nuanced kind of approach to things, but truly, right? So sometimes we start out with the basic building blocks, and then we need to understand the complexity. We have to have these understandings of this, and then it's like, yeah, it like just simplifies. It's really quite interesting. So that's what I want to say for anybody who experiences, the Chinese medicine or the chakras in a way different than what they read. Go with what feels right. Go with what you feel, and there's also like people who talk about like the evolutionary process of the chakras. Like, chakras are starting to do things more differently, and there is an evolutionary process of them, period. So there's that.
I hadn't heard that. I'll go look that up.
Yeah. And yeah, so just what I would say with books is like, take what resonates and leave the rest, and like keep learning and growing, and don't doubt, like, when it, like with the, like what you're noticing, what you've talked about, which I think is really pertinent, because a lot of people get to the point where they do notice this, where it's like, okay, well, how does it relate? Because this is so structured. It's just, this is this, and this is that, this is the root, and this is how, and the part, what would make a lot of sense too, is that it is a circuitry. It isn't just linear, these lines, like, when you buy actually, this is perfect. So the way this is actually, I really like the way this is set up. So there's sort of, you see how the colors, it's not
Blend. Yep.
Yes, it's not just green and then yellow, right? It's blending right here. And so this helps us to understand like what that blending is like. But it isn't quite as linear as this. There's just the circuitry, there's this nuance of it all connecting to each other. It's like, how does the root connect to the heart? And it does, right? But how? Because when you're looking at it, how is it connecting, right?
Yep.
And that's where those sub-chakra systems and the nadis and all of those sorts of things kind of go in. The same is true with Chinese medicine. So yes, the some of the it's just we segment it because our minds like segmentation, but then there has to be the understanding that everything's all related. Like, how do things connect? Because they do, kind of thing.
Yep.
So Again, this was more information. It's a little off topic, but it's kind of cool stuff. So
Thank you.
you're welcome. Anything else from either of you? No? Okay. Well, thank you both for joining me live, and thank you to everybody on the replay. Be sure if you have any questions to put it in the group rather than, you know, messaging me or anything like that, because if you put it in the group, it's a lot easier for me to respond, but also everybody else can see. And then you're welcome. And I will see everybody on Tuesday, I believe at 10 Eastern Standard Time. We will have an email go out with this replay and also the details for Tuesday.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You're welcome.